Morning Neuro Ninjas, welcome back to Wellbeing Workout. So today we're looking at imposter syndrome, and so many of us experience imposter syndrome. We're supporting lots of people right now dealing with imposter syndrome. So what is it and what can we do about it? Our brain builds models of the world. It even builds models about itself. It generates beliefs about us, our abilities, our talents. Our brain has got a system of circuits that create a narrative that join a bunch of details together. Some of those details may be connected, some may not. The models that the brain builds are built from its previous experiences, and they're often based on biases already existing in the brain. The brain has got quite a lot of biases, and they can also arise from complex developmental experiences that have happened to us when we're younger and we're not necessarily able to explain them or process them. Imposter syndrome basically is a species of rumination, overthinking or brooding built into the circuits of the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. Where's that? Behind your eyebrows. We sometimes call it the worry system. It's the reactive, impulsive bit of the prefrontal cortex that does lots of emotional reasoning. So based on feelings rather than facts. And as a result of those misapprehensions and brain biases, particularly around what it takes to learn something, become an expert, we can develop a set of unhelpful, growth-defeating beliefs about our own self-efficacy. So how does imposter syndrome arise? How do we end up in that space where we're overthinking and thinking that everyone else is better than us? Imposter syndrome basically arises from looking at the world using poor models of some fundamental processes. So these are the areas that imposter syndrome gets wrong in terms of the brain's assessment of what's actually going on. First of all, imposter syndrome brains make the assumption that everyone else is fine. Everyone's fine and I'm not. I am an imposter. I am hiding in plain sight. That's a wrong assumption. Imposter syndrome brains make a wrong assumption about the learning process. Imposter syndrome brains make the wrong assumption about what it takes to become an expert and what experts are. And imposter syndrome brains don't have a good model of how the mind arises from the brain. So let's unpack some of those things. So first of all, the nature of other people's internal life. You probably notice living in a brain that your brain spends an awful lot of its time thinking about what it's thinking and how its thinking is relating to what other people are thinking. And if we're experiencing imposter syndrome, we're probably walking around thinking, I've got no idea what I'm doing. And we're thinking that everyone else is fine. Everyone else is looking like they're on it. They're looking like they're really clear about what they're doing. Whereas actually, they're quite probably not. That idea that our internal life is different from other people's, that we're somehow exceptional, and often it's in a kind of negative way in terms of things like imposter syndrome and perfectionism. We're highly negative about our own experience. That idea that our experience is massively different from other people's is called pluralistic ignorance, when we mistakenly believe that other people are having internal experiences different from our own. So the bottom line here is lots of people have got moments of imposter syndrome through their day, through their week. That's part of the way the brain responds to the world. When we're in a space of that experience of not really understanding truly what people's inner life is like, we're stuck in emotional reasoning circuitry in an area of the brain called the insular cortex. That space is a cement mixer of motivation, mood, self-awareness, feelings and conscious desires. In that space, we imagine that other people are less neurotic than we are more competent than we are more confident than we are, experience less self-doubt than we do, and are happier than us. None of that's true. Why do we do this? Because other people seem to come across as confident, on it, calm, happy, not doubting themselves. And yet, if you think about it, we're projecting that into the world ourselves. We're not revealing our imposter syndrome. We're hiding it behind feelings of confidence, feeling on it, being calm and happy. Maybe other people are experiencing imposter syndrome as well. But we believe what we see because we don't have insight into their own internal dialogues and feelings, whereas we have insight into our own. We experience a similar process in relation to our own negative imposter flavoured thinking. We imagine our thoughts are true, are unlike everyone else's, are unhelpful, and they must be pushed away because they're upsetting, or they're unusual, weird and neurotic. What then happens is we put our energy into either battling the thought, pushing it away, wondering where it came from in the first place, and berating ourselves for having it. So we're in a tricky situation of rumination. How should we respond to this imposter flavoured rumination? We should see it for what it is. It's a cognitive distortion. It's a distortion of reality that's not based on reality. It's based on a misapprehension of the brain, a poor model. We should observe the cognitive distortion, the feeling of imposter syndrome. We shouldn't wear it, and we shouldn't go to war with it, and we should apply what's called a cognitive adaptation. So cognitive distortions are what happens when the VMPFC, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, spots change and uncertainty and begins a process of rumination. And there are lots of different sorts of cognitive distortion: catastrophizing, jumping to conclusions, blaming, etc. So let's just look at this in a specific way. Let's see the distorted thinking. Everyone else is better prepared for this meeting than I am. I'm such a fraud, is the distorted thinking we might suffer if we're experiencing imposter syndrome. Observe and note that. Don't wear it or battle with it. Don't invest in believing it or fighting it or distracting yourself from it. Just let it go. Apply a cognitive adaptation. I've prepared well. Everyone else appears to have prepared, because that's how everyone wants everyone else to see them. In fact, even though I'm having these thoughts of self-doubt, I'm projecting confidence. Maybe everyone else is doing the same. Imposter syndrome misunderstands what learning is. Imposter syndrome seems to think that learning is easy for everyone else and it's hard for us. That's not true. Learning is hard and becomes easier once we carry out practice. Imposter syndrome has poor models of what it takes to become an expert. From the outside, we think that expertise is about really bright, genius people coming up with the solutions in the moment. But that's actually not what's happened. Actually, expertise comes about because someone has practiced so much, they've burnt a complex response down into their neural circuitry. If you think about sports people, a perfect example of this, they've burnt rapid responses to situations like catching a ball in cricket, like serving a ball in tennis. They've burnt it down to their circuitry through practice. They've become experts through practice. They're not geniuses. And the final model that the brain builds that's quite poor in relation to imposter syndrome is how the mind arises from the brain. Our brain generates our mind like a projector produces an image. So whatever circuits are firing flavour our thinking the most. And if we've strengthened the circuits of rumination, that's going to flavour our thinking. So imposter syndrome is a brain not understanding its own nature and how self-doubt is a normal experience in any brain. Imposter syndrome is built on an unarticulated and broken model of how learning works and how expertise comes about. So imposter syndrome is a broken model of learning, expertise, and how brains make progress with problems. We make progress by making mistakes. We don't make progress by being perfect. So making the mistakes is actually part of growth and learning. We can stop imposter syndrome in a range of different ways, and we're coaching people in this process already. We can use the questions that the imposter internally asks into, rather than focused on ourselves, we can turn them into big questions that we ask of our ideas, our teams, our circumstances. We don't just direct them to ourselves. We need to remember that every expert was once a novice. Harnessing your inner imposter helps you set the direction of travel for your next steps on your personal development journey. If it feels a bit wobbly and it creates a bit of anxiety in you, it's probably an opportunity for growth and development. And embrace that doubt and humility as the route to doing a really good job, because that inspires diligence and determination rather than the assumption that it should be easy. Actually, everything that we're trying to do is complicated and difficult, and if we apply ourselves, apply attention, and diligence and determination, we're going to get a better outcome. And as you'd expect from us, there's a group of behaviours that we can coach you through that will move you from imposter syndrome to using the benefits of having a little bit of self-doubt to improve your work without it causing huge amounts of distress